Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Ahlulbayt live on Ahlulbayt TV with me, Rebecca Masterton, and my guest is Sheikh Rizwan Arastu. And you may have seen some information about a new volume of the collection of ahadith, very special ahadith from the school of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam that has been brought out, and we are honoured to have the translator of this new collection of Al-Kafi brought out, and he has come to our studios to talk a little bit more and to help us understand more about the significance and importance of Al-Kafi. In my experience, many people do not have Al-Kafi at home, so inshallah tonight we're going to find out why we need to buy this and why we need to have it at home. So Assalamu alaikum, welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam, thank you.
Like I said just now, a lot of people don't have Al-Kafi at home. This is one issue. Another issue is that it's actually difficult to get hold of. I myself was fortunate to have been given, a number of volumes that were from the old translation, the Wafis translation. But finding a translation of these books and these volumes is very, very difficult. I mean, before we go into perhaps more of what Al-Kafi is about, first of all, perhaps we could ask why it is we've got up to the 21st century and it's still so hard to get hold of the narrations of the Imams of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam.
Yeah, there's an issue of accessibility, and it's not simply an issue of finding books. It's the dearth of the books themselves.
Yeah.
Right? The translations haven't taken place, or if they have taken place, they've been at levels that are no longer sufficient. And maybe they were sufficient at the time, like the one you referred to. I think it happened closer to the after the revolution.
Right.
And there was a kind of a sudden surge in efforts to try to get all these teachings out there in any form possible. And any form was better than no form at all. But now we've reached a level where we need something a lot better at a higher standard.
Yeah.
So I think it's a matter of time. We're now getting a generation of scholars who are born in the English-speaking world and are going to study and coming back. And so, inshallah, as more of this generation kind of come back and start doing this kind of work, I hope we'll find more of these translations and just better access to the sources.
Inshallah. Because also I was having a conversation with a colleague who said that he was of the opinion that the Shi'i texts should not be translated because it kind of gives ammunition to people who have ill will.
Right.
And I said, well, other people of other schools are busy translating their works, and this is how they're spreading knowledge around the world of their madhab.
Right.
So, I mean, it might sound like a bit of a strange question or basic question, but why should it be translated into English? I mean, shouldn't it be kind of protected, kept into Persian and Arabic and kind of protected and kept hidden? And
yeah, absolutely. There are two major problems that people kind of are paranoid in a way about when they see this effort to translate this text. And one is what you mentioned, that it'll give ammunition to other people. The other is that people are worried that the Shia themselves will no longer have need for scholars, or no longer feel like they need to go through the institution of, for instance, a marj' taqlid to find out their fatwas. They'll open up a book and say, well, Imam Sadiq said this, so I'm going to go and act on it. Those are real dangers, but they're dangers that we can I think plan for and try to mitigate. That's the whole idea behind coupling the translation with commentary. If we were to simply put a translation out there, then yes, that would be the case. That would kind of be giving ammunition to whoever has whatever intention. They can just take the text and run with it.
They can interpret it how they want.
Right, but once we go through whatever due diligence to make sure the translation itself is communicating the intent that we understand from the source, and then we couple it with commentary that's kind of keeping in mind the possible, connotations, the possible, problems that people will see in the text, and we try to, answer those upfront, preempt those questions. Then, I think we've done everything we can to try to ensure that only good comes of the translation. There'll always be room for people to do what they want, but we've done our part to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think also what's quite amazing about the text of the Ahlulbayt alayhim salam is that it's kind of late in the day, in my view, that they are being translated. When we think again about Orientalist scholars that went into the Muslim world, started to write about Muslims. Okay, they've been doing that for like 100 years, 200 years, if not more. Right. And then we have the texts from other schools of thought being translated, at least, we could say particularly from the 80s, the 90s, and distributed widely. And yet we see, after all these centuries, that still people are hesitating about. I mean, I remember having discussions again with different libraries actually in Iran. It's about why hasn't this been translated up to now? Why can't we get the whole translation? And they were saying, well, it has to be the right person to translate it, and we can't find the right person. And this kind of seemed a bit puzzling to me. It's like you can't find, like, out of whole of the Muslim world, you can't find like one person, the right person to translate it. Is this again an issue of? Is this a real issue that it's difficult to find someone who has? I suppose you'd say fluent English and say fluent Arabic would be difficult.
No, I wish it were that easy. If that were the case, if those are the only two parameters you had to account for, then I think it would be a lot easier. So maybe they're being too cautious. I think in our team we do have what it takes to do it, but it takes a lot more than just language skills.
Yeah.
And as I've been talking about this book since we started the work back in 2006 or 7, my constant challenge is, as soon as I'll give my spiel and explain what we're doing, what the whole organization is about, and then the people will come away with, oh, it's just a translation. And no, look at what we're doing. It's not just a translation. To do a good translation, in addition to the language skills, especially in this case, you need to know the content as well.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is actually we're writing an original commentary on the text, and our effort is to try to communicate in English as much of the Arabic as we can. So it's not just language, but there's a lot more that goes into language than just words.
Yeah.
Right. So you have idioms that are irrelevant to the English language. We need to understand them in the source and then find comparable expressions in our language. There are cultural things that we have to account for. Sometimes some particular behavior might be appropriate in the Imam's times and inappropriate in our times, or vice versa. And we have to account for that as well, because sometimes, for instance, sometimes a person who seems very innocent will come to the Imam and ask a question, and the Imam will have, his response will be, for instance, we came across this phrase recently, he'll say, "Thakilatka ummuk," which is it sounds like a very harsh phrase. Yeah. He says, may your mother be bereaved of you, meaning may you die.
Yeah.
And it seems like a very shocking, why would the Imam react like that to this person's question? And he goes on and has a very normal conversation, just explains and gives the answer to the question of the questioner. And so we had to kind of go through and understand, what is this phrase, where is it used, in what context? And we came to the conclusion that actually this is a very normal kind of, almost like the that we have, just a very normal thing that just happens in conversation. And it simply, at most, it might mean something like, I'm surprised at your question, or that's an interesting question, or something like that. So
that's very interesting, though, because that means that when we're reading the translation, we can actually learn a lot more about Arabic as well as just reading the translation. Yeah,
that's really where dictionaries come from. It's from seeing how things are used in the people who speak that language. And, that actually has created a kind of a problem for us, because as we're going through the text, we're realizing that many phrases that are there in the ahadith of the Ahlulbayt are not present in dictionaries. And so we've kind of induced from the lack of these phrases in dictionaries, that the dictionaries were mainly focused on the Sunni literature. Almost all the lexicographers that we have were Sunni. There are very few like Al-Khalil, and even there, we may not be absolutely sure what exactly their beliefs were.
So actually, some of the language that has been used by Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam has not been used.
Not that it's not been used, but it hasn't been recorded.
It's been used differently.
It may not have been recorded,
right.
Or it may have been used. It was used at a little bit later time than lexicographers kind of took a snapshot of the Jahili kind of language.
Okay, so and just to go back, because you mentioned like 2006, 2007. So this is, I mean, how did the whole? I think also it's good to get across to our viewers the effort that goes into something like this.
Yeah.
The planning that goes into it. So you mentioned 2006, 2007. How did this all start and come about?
It's a long story, but it started with a couple of classes that I initiated in Qom when I was studying in the seminary. I had reached a level in my studies where I had all the basic tools that I needed. I'd gone through what's called the Muqaddimat, kind of the first level of study. So I had the tools. In the normal curriculum of the Hawza, you don't really get to the text. Like you don't actually get to studying a hadith until much later in what's called Dars Kharij, and that was going to be many years in the future for me. So I wanted to get to them sooner rather than later. So I started studying Usul Al-Kafi and one volume of Wasail al-Shia with two different teachers, and through that I started to realize that this is something that we should package and give to people, because the ability to sit down with a scholar who understands the text, to read it with them and pick their brain, play devil's advocate, ask them dumb questions, and no holds barred in terms of what questions you can ask, and to get a kind of a well-reasoned, rational answer. That was it was amazing. So I said, let's do this on an official level and kind of record our conversations. So with that, I remember the conversation that happened with my teacher. I said, this is great. Let's package it. And he said, I said, well, someone should do this. Like let's find someone to do it. He said, why don't you do it? Why don't you start? And that kind of took me by surprise, because I didn't even think that that's something within the realm of what I could possibly do. Yeah. But so we put a proposal together. We wanted to see if anyone was already doing it, because it seemed like an obvious thing that should have already been done. Yeah. So I took the proposal. I just went around to all the major organizations, major scholars in Qom, to see if they were doing it themselves, if they knew anyone who was doing it, and no one was. And so we decided to start.
Alhamdulillah.
So we came over. I established an office and a library there in Qom for the local scholars there to be, and then I came back to America, and. So now the work happens on a daily basis. They come there, I come here, and in real time we just use Skype and Uber and these kinds of things to have our conversations. Yeah. We share screens, and we do the research together, write our Arabic commentary together.
So it's a group of you that have been working on it.
Yeah.
So how many was in the team?
There are 3 in Iran, and then myself on this side.
Okay.
And those are we're the researchers and the translators, and the board and everyone else is also there to support us.
That's interesting what you say about reading a hadith, because I've been coming from an academic perspective. I was out in Iran last year, and again trying to actually access Al-Kafi or other hadith collections for various reasons, and I found that. Again, it's actually quite difficult. It's difficult to get access.
What do you mean by to find the book?
It's difficult
to read and understand it.
It's difficult to be introduced to the people who know the texts. And I think from what you say with the system out there, that you actually traditionally you should wait once you've gone through the system, and then you reach Dars Kharij. Then you get access to the hadith collections. But if you're coming in from the outside, sort of flying into the country, and just saying, right, give me access to your hadith collections, that's going to be, it kind of takes some kind of introduction, to people, and it seems like this could be one of the reasons, perhaps, why it's difficult to get hold of the texts, because they have been taught in this way, or they have been revealed to the students according to a particular method and system.
I don't think that's the case. I don't think there's any conscious effort to put barriers between people and the text. I think if it's not focused on, it's mainly because Many people don't think that that's the best way to educate people about Islam.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's more useful, like in the context of a thematic speech.
Yeah.
If I'm talking about a particular topic, then it makes sense for me to choose specific ahadith that help the topic and present those and kind of teach those ahadith in particular, not to open up a book and read from beginning to end all of the different ahadith in that chapter. Right. So we have a hadith, for instance, within a chapter that are all basically saying the same thing, but some will be more, have stronger texts.
Yeah.
They'll be kind of less problematic, and some will be more problematic. And so it makes sense for a scholar to choose the ones that communicate the best and present that as a sample of what's communicated in the whole chapter of the book.
Okay. So now it's out there. I mean, there were again some issues like the issue of its authenticity here. We know that later on some of the narrations from Al-Kafi were edited out in later collections of hadith. Is that right? They weren't. A lot of the narrations in Al-Kafi were, for example, in Majlisi. He didn't include all of them. Is that right?
I don't know. That would make. I don't know for sure. Like what kind of if you compare what's in one and what's in the other, what's not there, what is there. Generally, Bihar al-Anwar is more comprehensive, and I would imagine it would include everything plus a lot more.
Yeah.
But again, it would take someone to actually go through one-to-one and see which hadith are there and not there. You're not saying that Al-Kafi itself was edited or things were taken out of Al-Kafi. You're saying other people's collections.
It would be. I think there's from my limited understanding, there's this kind of discussion about how Al-Kafi relates to Bihar al-Anwar. And my understanding, I could be wrong, my understanding was that with Bihar al-Anwar, with the collection of hadith in there, some were taken from Al-Kafi, but certain ahadith from Al-Kafi were not recorded or were sort of considered not to be wholly authentic, for example.
It's possible. Again, you have to see specific ahadith, but it's each compiler's it's its prerogative to kind of choose those ahadith that he thinks are authentic or are communicating something that's corroborated by the Quran or whatever it is, but he's not going to, in good conscience, he can't include a hadith that he doesn't think is actually from the Imams without at least putting a footnote saying it has been said, but it's most likely incorrect, or we have plenty of hadith that contradict. He'll put some, and usually in Bihar that's what he'll do. He tends to include a lot more than what he believes in.
Okay.
But then he himself will have like a little section that says bayan or aqul, and he'll say that there are these contradictory ahadith. I believe that the ones that are saying such and such are the true things that the Imams are saying. The other ones were based on taqiyya, and they're saying that because of the Sunni audience or because of some other greater
right.
So then he'll explain kind of how to put together or what do you call it, like, almost like find not common ground, but like how to. What do you call it? Like when you have contradictory things and you find some sort of
balance,
a way to decide what's right and what's wrong.
Okay.
But you come to some understanding.
Okay. I mean and also I know that these collections. I mean, this is again that people from other schools of thought don't understand, is that when they're trying to kind of attack Shia texts, they say, well, this is their Sahih. This is the Sahih of the Shia, for example, but that category is not used. We don't say Sahih for any collection.
That's right.
It's not. I mean, I've read through some of for example, the Wafis translation that was done in Tehran, and as you say, there are some commentaries under certain narrations where he says it's quite possible that this is not authentic because of X, Y, Z. So what did you do about those ones? The ones that have some kind of...
We haven't gotten, so far we've reached from the beginning of Al-Kafi to like we're about a fourth of the way through Kitab al-Tawheed.
Right.
So we probably how many hadith is that? It's probably like on the order of 100, 150 hadith or something like that. But we haven't come across those really problematic ones. Later on in the book on the Quran, there we do have a hadith that, for instance, talk about the alterations and distortions that have occurred in the Quran.
Right.
And the Quran that we have now is a part of the original Quran. We have a hadith like that, definitely. Yeah. So we haven't decided yet, but in our mind when we started, we had decided, when we made the commitment to present all of Al-Kafi, we decided that those kinds of ahadith we will include, and we have to include them because they're part of the book. But our commentary has to deal with them and translate them so that otherwise, a lot of times the Shia will kind of launch this kind of argument against our Sunni brothers that they've changed their sources, or if they're problematic ahadith in Al-Bukhari and stuff, then later editions will not have that. Yeah. And we say the same thing about Bible translation sometimes, that things change over time and kind of are quietly edited out. Yeah. So we don't want to be guilty of the same thing. If it's a hadith, it's a hadith. Let's fix our understanding of what a hadith is, rather than kind of covering it up and putting it under the rug. Yeah. Let's understand that a hadith is not the same as the Imam. It's not necessarily what the Imam has said. It's a quotation that is attributed to the Imam. Yeah. Right. So if you understand it like that, or it's a description of what was seen of the Imam, and so there's room for error in a hadith, even though the source is infallible, but the hadith itself is fallible. Because it's narrated by a person, it could be falsely attributed, it could be invented, it could be mistooken. The person mistook it and misunderstood what was said. Yeah. So all of that stuff is there. If we understand that, I think then that'll take care of the problems that we see in a hadith.
I mean, if we were to think about, for example, supposing someone from the other school of thought, or from the Sunni school of thought, is coming to Al-Kafi. Now I know, having been Sunni for 4 years before I came to Path of Ahlulbayt 10 years ago, that you are told to keep away from the books of the Ahlulbayt or the books of the Shia, and that they have no basis. They're all completely fabricated, and they've got no basis at all. So how, for someone who might be approaching the book like that, saying, well, how do I know that this has any basis at all? Is there a methodology, or in the authentication of these narrations, where you could say, well, yes, we can actually demonstrate that these hadiths do have a basis and that most of them are authentic?
Yeah, that's a very hard question. I'm not sure. I haven't thought about that much. Right. Thinking of somebody who's coming in who possibly this is I think the way to start. It's even in terms of our beliefs. Like sometimes people will present think that they have a duty, for instance, to teach people about Imam Mahdi alayhi salam. Yeah. Right. It makes absolutely no sense to go and teach a non-Muslim about Imam Mahdi alayhi salam. Yeah. Or a Sunni about Imam Mahdi alayhi salam. Because there's so many intermediary steps that they have to go through before they get to a belief like that. If they don't even know anything about Imamah, they don't even know anything about the Prophet or Islam, then how are they going to even understand something as supernatural and as difficult to understand as the 12th Imam's Imamah, right? So I think a similar kind of logic has to go in here, where it's not a good idea just to throw a book in front of someone and say, here's Al-Kafi, read it, and somehow magically you're going to become, an outstanding Shi'i. That's unrealistic. Mm-hmm. Someone who's coming in from the outside, they have other issues to deal with that are much more fundamental, which are within their grasp. If a person doesn't even believe in God, that needs to be dealt with first before you get into detailed rulings of fiqh, for instance. Right? So let's work with them at other levels. We could, as a Shi'i Muslim, I can use the hadith and kind of see, well, how do the Imams deal with similar situations? And I can benefit and then use whatever I can get from that in talking to the person. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't make any sense to present the hadith to the person and say, here, read this hadith and convert. Right? It's unrealistic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I wasn't suggesting that, but thank you very much. And we're about to go to break. Inshallah, we'll see you again in a few minutes. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Ahlulbayt Live, where we have our guest Sheikh Rizwan Arasto, who has been involved in the new translation of the first volume of Al-Kafi, and this is available now for all our viewers, and we can definitely encourage our viewers to go and get that and build up a library in your house so that you can become directly familiar with the teachings of the Imams of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, especially with regard to a lot of the debates. Sometimes we find that people, going to classes or studying, they have issues arising that they want, they need an answer to. And very often these issues have been answered already by the Imam all those years ago, which is quite fascinating.
Right.
I did say volume 1, but you said it's how much of it exactly?
I think of it more like book 1. So
book 1.
We decided to publish it according to the original subdivision that Al-Kulaini had envisioned.
Okay.
So like nowadays we're used to thinking in terms of volume. So like until recently, the edition of Al-Kafi that was out there was an 8-volume edition, and so it's been there for so many years. People kind of refer to volume 1 and volume 2 up to volume 8. But Al-Kafi himself, he envisioned a 35 part division. There are 35 books.
Okay.
Right, so we decided to publish each book as a separate book. So the first edition or the first kind of part of this is book 1. Intellect and Foolishness.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, for those who might have some of the Wafis editions, Wafis was the company that translated it in Iran. As you say, it can get quite confusing because, as you say, you've got these divisions of books, but then within those books you've got X number of volumes, a certain
chapters,
number of volumes.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know about theirs. Yeah, theirs is very complicated.
Yeah, so you've got book 1, volume 1, chapter.
Yeah, so we're going to have book 1, and then there are multiple chapters.
Right. Okay.
So it's more like I think it's more like what we're used to.
Okay.
It's similar to the way the Bible is divided as well. Right? So you have a book, and then you have chapters.
Right. Because I know even when I'm kind of looking through my shelf, or you need to reference something. So, oh God, was it volume 3, book 2, or book 2, volume 3?
Yeah.
So, book 2, volume 3, subdivision 3, because it's got these subdivisions as well.
Yeah, we developed a numbering system. Hopefully, it'll simplify things. Where there's a series of numbers, and those will be consistent throughout the book. So, if you have the key, you'll be able to follow those numbers well.
That's good. Alhamdulillah. Looking at, of course, the issue of authenticity, because I remember sitting in khutbahs at my university and hearing that the Sahih of Bukhari was the most sound after the Holy Quran. If something like that is Sahih, is sound and indisputable, wouldn't it be better to go to that rather than to a book like Al-Kafi, where there are some debatable narrations as well as some authentic narrations?
Right. It's one thing for the followers of a particular religion or sect to claim authenticity for a text, and it's another thing for it to actually be authenticated. Mm-hmm. Right. So just because even a Christian or a follower of any other religion might make the same sort of claim about their own religious texts and things like that. That they're the most sound kind of communication of God that we have. But it's up to me as an individual to decide for myself, on what basis is that, and let me look at the content of it. Let me look at kind of the connection between the recorder and the source, and see, is that connection a sound connection, or no, is there something better? I think maybe that's the best way to think about the comparison between something like Al-Bukhari and Kafi or any of the Shi'i collections. It's the connection between the compiler and the source, who's the Prophet. Right. So our whole goal is to try to figure out what were the teachings of the Prophet. What did he say? How did he act? And so we want to see, since we don't have direct connection to him, we have to see what's the best connection we can have to him. Yeah. Right. So if you have connection to him through infallibles, then that's certainly better than having connection to him through fallible people who we know made mistakes at times, sometimes had bad intentions, sometimes made honest mistakes. Right. So the Shi'i claim is that we have these individuals in the persons of the Imams who are complete embodiments of all of the teachings of the Prophet, and all those teachings are passed down generation after generation until kind of the Muslim community gets to a level where they have intellectuals who can then record those things in a more reliable way, where their recordings of those teachings will stay for posterity, right? Because at the time of the Prophet, even if someone wrote something down, for that to last very long was a pretty far, a tall order. Just because writing there wasn't a culture of writing and libraries and books and things like that at that time. But as Muslim society, the academic kind of level increased, books became important, and now for Kulaini to write a book at the time that he did, that was a book that could last and has lasted, and we have manuscripts going all the way back to him.
This is another point again for our viewers from other schools of thought, because again there's often this strange confusion, we could say, that again followers of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, they don't refer to the ahadith of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, they just refer to the ahadith of the Imams. And again, this is quite a misunderstanding about why we turn to the Imams. I mean, for example, we can say, well, if we look at, again, the collections from other schools, people will listen to the narration of a companion or the narration of one of the wives, and so they still take those narrations as being authentic. We take the narrations from the Imams who have, again, been handed them down from the Holy Prophet. So it still is the teachings of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, but it's just from, as you say, the source that's been protected from error.
Right, exactly. There's a hadith in Al-Kafi. It's from Imam, I believe it's Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. So he says that all of my ahadith are the ahadith of my father, all of his ahadith are the ahadith of his father, and he goes all the way back to the Prophet, and all of his teachings were from Gabriel, and all of his were from God. And so he establishes that link, and that's exactly how we understand whatever we quote from an imam. It's exactly. I mean, it's what he has received through the inheritance of knowledge from the Prophet himself. So I guess we could trace every hadith back to the Prophet, but it would be kind of a redundant activity. Every time you get to Imam Sa'd, then you have to go through his father, and then you have to go all the way back up to the Prophet.
And this is why, again, in the narrations, again, for people who might be turning to the collections of, again, hadith narrated by the Imams of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, why it will say Imam al-Sadiq said, or Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam said, because there's that implicit understanding that this has been, either they will be elaborating on a hadith, explaining a meaning of a hadith, or explaining a fiqhi issue, or many other issues, or else they will be narrating a hadith from the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family.
Right. Well, that's not. Well, I think we should expand on it a little bit, because it's not exactly that they're simply narrators.
Yeah.
Right? Because a narrator's job is simply to communicate whatever he heard from whoever he's narrating from. The Imams, their role is greater than that. Because if you think of it, the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was. Imagine he had a huge body of knowledge. He was only able to communicate a very small portion of that to companions.
Yeah.
Right. But the entirety of it was passed on to Imam Ali alayhi salam. And like from the exchanges and stuff, we understand that it wasn't kind of a regular. I mean, he had regular teacher-student relationships with Imam Ali alayhi salam too, where he would actually dictate and those sorts of things. But for that kind of knowledge to be transferred in that kind of a short time. Certainly later imams are maybe even a better example. We have child imams, and sometimes they have very little direct contact with their father. They're still able to have all of the knowledge of the imam, of the previous imam and the Prophet. So it had to have happened in some sort of miraculous way.
I think you're right, especially when you look at the nature of the knowledge. I mean, again, coming onto this path, one thing that struck me was that these collections of ahadith are much more satisfying for the intellect, in that, because also you have scenarios where, as you say, someone will come to the imam and ask him a question, and then he'll explain. So they are very rational and very balanced. You can't kind of argue around them. They're pretty. Their arguments and their explanations are very kind of signed and sealed in a way.
Right.
We could say.
Yeah.
What was your experience of translating this? because it's taken all these years. So just a kind of insight into maybe some stories of some experiences of are we going to make it? Are we going to complete it? Or
the first day that we sat down, there were actually three of my teachers on the team and myself. And I had this grand plan that we would be able to, all sit down around the round table, put a hadith in before us, and everyone would very calmly kind of offer their area of expertise, and somehow we'd come out with this beautiful commentary and whatever of this. And it was a disaster. We got to the first word of the first hadith of Kitab al-Aqli wal-Jahl, and we got stuck on that for I think it was like at least one day, maybe 2 days. We couldn't get past the word istintaq. The word istantaqa comes in that hadith.
Right.
And we couldn't decide. One person argued that it means that Allah gave intellect the power to speak. One person said, no, He gave him the power to think. And then one person said, no, it has the thinking and speaking have no place here. And it was just like, it was a really heated debate over this one word. And I realized this is this is never going to work like this, because you have people who are extremely well studied.
Yeah.
Everyone has, a strong reason for why they believe a certain thing, and it wasn't a matter of like strong wills or stubbornness or something like that. It's just when you've invested a lot in a particular idea, you have so many reasons for why you think something. It's very hard to kind of let that go. And so then I changed the model totally on the third day. On the third day, so now we have more of an assembly line type of thing where it goes to one person, he puts in his 2 cents, and then the result of that goes to the next person. So we'll still come together, like we're working in real time, so an issue will come up where we need kind of a consultation, so I'll call everyone together and then we'll discuss that particular issue, and sometimes it'll also get heated again, but it's fine because now I've set up a hierarchy whose say is last, and so everyone can have their say, but then the final decision is going to be with Sheikh Ahmadi, and whatever he says goes.
This reminds me of a narration where the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, his family, says, whenever a group of you is travelling, appoint a leader. So it seems that this is what was needed in this case as well.
One really strange thing and innovation in our organization is that it's kind of upside down, meaning Shi'i scholarly works have always been led by a high-ranking scholar with a long kind of history and these sorts of things, and then he'll work independently, or he'll get his students to aid him as research assistants in his work. We've never, or I should say maybe rarely, if ever, had parallel kind of cooperation between people at the same level of scholarship, and certainly never like this, where I'm now the student who has kind of organized something where the teachers are now,
You're directing the project.
So it's very strange in that way, but it works, alhamdulillah, because we've developed enough of a rapport. They understand that I'm not somebody who's going to ever disrespect them. I always.
But they must have trusted you from the beginning to suggested it.
We had a long history because I studied so many books with them. We'd been together for 4 or 5 years, and they knew me on a personal level. So I don't know if it could have worked otherwise.
Also with the commentary. So did you worked on the commentary?
Yeah, I wear many hats, many imamas. I wear many hats. So we work on the Arabic commentary together. So I actually. I actually end up kind of writing it, the Arabic commentary that we're writing first.
Right.
It's not, I guess, important to know as well. So the common language that we have is Farsi and Arabic, the team and myself. So we do our discussions in Farsi, write our commentary in Arabic first. That commentary is mainly, it's meant to serve the translator, right? Whether it's me or someone else, but it's meant to be a tool for the translator to then both translate the text and also write a commentary. So the Arabic commentary, it's a lot more. There are a lot of more technical aspects to it. So we'll have, for instance, detailed linguistic discussions or grammatical discussions. So certainly we don't translate those discussions into English in the English commentary. The English commentary, you'll only see the kind of the things that are relevant and interesting for someone who's accessing the English text as a non-specialist. So theological issues and historical issues, stuff like that.
So it's really to try to, because again, I suppose we could say, again, for the benefit of our viewers, what is the purpose of the commentary? Obviously, to help people to understand it. But,
Yeah. So at first, the Arabic commentary is to help the translator understand everything.
Right.
Which happens to be me, but we've developed a model so it could be anyone else. So now we can hand this Arabic commentary to somebody who speaks, like a Hausa student from, I don't know, from China, and he would be able to use this text now to translate into his language. So now he has everything he needs in terms of understanding the hadith and expressing things to address doubts. It may not be totally 100% relevant because we're writing it kind of with a Western audience in mind. Maybe they have different issues that they would come to their mind and a different background, so they'd have to adjust for that.
Okay.
But I think to a great extent, this will serve any translator.
Wow, and then you've got the commentary on sort of the meaning of a hadith as well. You sort of expanded on that.
Yeah.
What did you? How did you write this commentary? I mean, how did you sort of decide what's going to go into it?
I think I put myself in I guess where I was 15 years ago or 20 years ago. And thinking back to my college days, if I were to read this text from that perspective as someone who had no background and was just trying to learn, what kinds of questions and doubts would come to my mind? So I kind of, I've been in many different kind of shoes, and I think to some extent I can understand, empathize with different people's perspective. I grew up as an Ismaili in a Sunni Wahhabi community. Wow. Then I went to a university where we had an extremely diverse community of Ismailis and different kinds of Sunnis and Shi'i, and then I became a 12er Shi'i, and I went to the Hausa, and so I kind of I think I have an idea about the different kinds of issues that someone would face.
In a way, that puts you in an advantage because so you understand where, especially people in the West are coming from. And people who will be coming to the text who are not familiar with it. Yeah.
That's really a surprising thing as well with the relationship we have within our team. Because we tried some other people as well. Like we had actually had several other people who we brought into the team. But one of the things that made it work with the current team is that they're completely willing to do whatever it takes for this particular project. Meaning like. They're scholars in their own right, and they have other ideas about what needs to be explained. Yeah. But they understand that the audience is important, and so there might be issues that are interesting for some people, or for an academic, for instance, which will be completely irrelevant and boring for somebody else. And so they're totally willing to let me take the lead and say, this is the kind of issue that we need to focus on. This is where I think someone's going to attack us, so we need to prepare for that. Yeah. And so they'll put aside the other issues and just focus on what's important for us.
That is really important because also definitely, as you say, when people get very deeply into their studies, they can become very fascinated by sort of these little tiny details, and the whole world revolves around these details, and then they'll try and communicate it to someone else, and someone's like, okay, how's that relevant to me? Right. So that can't have been easy, thinking about, okay, what should we put into it, what's relevant, and as you say, also this is where we could potentially be attacked as well. Yeah. That's very important, because that goes back to the comment that I made at the beginning about, well, we shouldn't translate this because, we're going to be attacked. So, but actually, you've done the commentary with that in mind.
Right.
Yeah.
The way the commentary works, it doesn't. We don't necessarily comment on something if it's clear, right? So we try to make some of the like I mentioned, some of the commentary in the Arabic was meant to help the translator translate correctly. So if that's the case, if we're able to kind of fix the text in the text itself, then we do that with brackets and stuff. We'll insert things that make the text flow and communicate what's needed to be communicated. But then wherever there's an issue that needs to be addressed, then we'll put a footnote for that and communicate that in a footnote separately. Mm-hmm. So.
And also, of course, the readability of the English. So, I mean, like you said as well, translation isn't just, putting one. I mean, I've worked with different languages, and I've even studied sort of, there's now I think even a whole new field called translation studies. So it's becoming a science of translation in a way, because this is the thing that I have found when I've read a narration in English and then I read it in the Arabic, and I realise, oh my God, there's so much more in the Arabic than there was in the English, or the English has changed this meaning. So it's a huge challenge to try to put the Arabic in something that's readable understandable for the audience, but that doesn't change what was intended in the hadith.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we try to focus on, like kind of to get before I started this, I remember while I was studying in Qom, I had read this book by Eugene Nida. Actually, the translator of the Quran, Ali Qara'i.
Okay. Yeah.
He had suggested this book, and he gave me an old photocopied version of it, and I thought it was really fascinating. And one of the things that Eugene Nida talks about, he's the head of I think it's the American Bible Society or something.
Right.
So his organization has translated the Bible into something like 1,000 different languages and dialects. So he says like the goal of the translator should be to communicate that the response of the reader of the translation should be the same as the response of the reader of the original text.
Right.
So if you think of it like that, it's much more than just word to word.
Yeah.
Right. The feeling, the emotion, the literary devices that are being used, the beauty, all that stuff has to be communicated.
That is a huge challenge.
Yeah.
As well. Especially as English kind of sounds it's a little bit of a drier language than Arabic, I'd say. So it's difficult to always get that flow and, in the words.
I remember there was I think there was a phrase in Dua Nudba, when we translated that it refers to the imams as, in Arabic it would be flags of guidance, or something like that, flags of guidance. But that doesn't really do anything for us in English.
Yeah.
So we decided to use beacons instead, a beacon of guidance. Yeah. And that's a more kind of a familiar phrase that communicates the same thing, but it's an idiom that we're familiar with.
That's great. Thank you very much. And we are about to go to break again. Inshallah, we will continue with a discussion on Al-Kafi. Again, this is a book that everybody should have in their library or on their bookshelf and start reading it. Inshallah, we'll see you again in a few minutes. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Ahlulbayt Live on Ahlulbayt TV, where we are discussing the new translation of Al-Kafi, which you should have seen probably mentioned on the channel as well. And we know that we are broadcasting globally, and this is really a way that we as followers of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam could move forward. I have my guest Sheikh Rizwan Arastu, who has been involved in the translation of this text, and we've just been talking about translating the flow of the Arabic, the meaning of the Arabic into English. I mean, it's not an easy task. It's not just word for word, put this here, put that there. Translation really is a kind of a science, and it's a philosophy, and you have to be thinking about your position, the position of the narrator, the position of the reader.
Right.
It's a lot to take on.
Yeah, it takes a lot of empathy, I think, to put yourself in those positions.
Yeah.
One of the things, one of the challenges that a translator has is to completely understand the source,
right.
and then the second challenge is to completely communicate that into the receiving language. That's the structure that we've come up with at ITI. Part of it is to kind of enhance the capacity of the translator to at least on the first part to get from the source.
Yeah.
Right? So instead of a single person sitting there with his own limited understanding trying to glean something from the text, now we have multiple minds, multiple scholars with varying expertise, all in the head of the translator. So it's amazing. What we found is through the process, through all of the various processes that it takes to finally come up with the translation, there are many different places where problems can arise.
Yeah.
So sometimes it happens that we'll write the Arabic commentary and we feel very comfortable with what we've written, and then when I get to the stage where I'm trying to translate the text, I realize that there's a hole in what we said, or we didn't address something that's very key. And so then we'll go back and we can rework the Arabic commentary to address those holes that I've seen. Sometimes that will happen. I'll pass it on to the editor, on the English side, and he'll find holes, he'll find contradictions, he'll find problems. So again, we'll go back to the Arabic, rewrite the translation, and give it back to the editor.
That's a huge job.
So, but it's wonderful because there's so many checks and balances to make sure that the final product is something that's sound.
Also, of course, thinking about, okay, so, well, Volume 1 has been translated already, so why did it need translating again? I mean, what were obviously with due respect to the people who translated it initially 20, 30 years ago, what were the things that you felt needed to be kind of changed, or, you know,
right.
Why did it need to be translated again?
Yeah, there are at least 3 efforts that I know of to date of translating Al-Kafi. One was the Wolfus one you mentioned. I think that was the first one. There was another one done in India around 1994, I believe, was the publication date.
Right. And
then a third one has been done recently by Sheikh Muhammad Sarwar within the last 10 years. Again, yeah, with due respect to the people who have worked on those, because I think they did what they thought was best at the time, and with all the resources that they had, they did whatever work they could. The translation itself was not as good as what we can now produce.
Right.
Right, and so I'm not sure what the background of all of those different translators were in terms of how well they understood the Arabic text, how much access they had to commentaries. Like now in our work we have access to 15 different commentaries on Al-Kafi in Arabic that were all written back in the 17th century. I don't know if they had access to that back then, because they might have still been in manuscript form, stuff like that. So we benefit from that. The level of our team is now, I think, at a higher level than any of the other individuals or teams have been in the past. The scholarship of the team is extremely high. Their experience with this kind of work. My background, I think, it just speaks to a generation where we now have a generation of people who are well educated in the West, who have then also been well educated in the Hausa. And we've
got this coming together. I mean, we're living in a global age now, so we've got, as you say, this coming together of different languages and understanding of different, sides of the world. And so then you're able to, and this is the direction that everybody's going in, really, I think.
Right. It's a natural progression. So the translation itself, I think, was not as good, and now the translation is better. The commentary, there was no commentary in the previous translations either, and that I think is vital. Even with the Quran, with any of these texts, I think it's extremely important not only to have a good translation, but to have a guiding kind of commentary to help people. Otherwise, you can, I mean, Sunnis and every other sect of Muslims has believed in the same Quran, but they've justified their own schools of thought with the Quran itself.
And as you say, also the science of interpreting Quran. It's quite interesting because, again, the few commentaries that I've read on some of the ayahs of Quran, for example, you realise that the language is quite symbolic, actually. Even that might be, for example, something like the dried up corn. Okay, it was an ayah I was reading today about likening the life of this world to the roots that grow up, the shoots that grow up, and then they become like dried up corn. Okay, you might take that as this is like on the transitory nature of the world, but you'll find that in the commentary this can mean something completely that you didn't expect. Especially, again, and this is, of course, where followers of Ahlulbayt get shot down by other schools, because, especially with regard to walaya, because also when we see the commentary of the Imams of Ahlulbayt, for example, that ayah in Holy Quran where it says they strive to put out the light of Allah. Again, we know that one of the interpretations of this light is the walaya. So this is the importance of a commentary, as you say, that if you don't have the right guide, you will only get sort of a superficial understanding of it,
or at best, even the wrong understanding.
Yeah. Thinking about, again, the modern world that we're living in, if we want to call it modern. I also debate that term, but how have you sort of thought about packaging Al-Kafi for a mass audience? I mean, this is really, it's not just for, as we say, the scholars or those who have gone to Dars Kharij. This is for all of us readers who want access to these texts.
Right.
How have you sort of gone about?
We didn't have illusions that this would be a New York Times bestseller. It's not the kind of text that makes for light reading.
Yeah.
I can imagine people just sitting on the subway and just casually reading.
You never know, inshallah.
Maybe. So definitely, it's definitely for a non-specialist audience.
Yeah.
So constantly our audience, like the audience we're writing for is that. So we're not assuming any background study about Islam or any knowledge of Arabic or certain the lingo and stuff that's used among scholars. We don't assume any of that stuff. But it does require somebody who is educated, at least in a Western sense, in terms of their strength of language and they're thinkers and they want to learn and understand. How we've packaged it, the publisher Taqwa Media has done a lot to try to enhance kind of the presentation of the book.
Right.
I think that's really important. So the content, ITI was able to produce the content, but Taqwa Media has kind of put it in a cover that's beautiful.
Yeah.
They're producing it in electronic form as well for iPad and I guess as technology advances, it'll be for other sorts of devices as well.
So that's because I think again, this involves a changing of thinking and a changing of culture, because first of all, like you said, there's been a fear that if the masses or us masses get hold of these texts, then we will bypass teachers to help us to teach these texts. So we'll all start to be little mini ulama who think that they know what this text means,
right.
And we might start sort of quoting from it and misinterpreting it, making dreadful mistakes. There's that issue, but there's also the issue of in my view, over all of my years of teaching, this sense among many people that this isn't my concern. This is for. It's kind of like the reverse. Well, this is for the scholars. This isn't for me, and I'll just listen to what they tell me it should be, and it's not up to me to read or to have these books on my shelf. I feel that this is, personally speaking, this is a kind of a weakness in the community of followers of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, is a lack of familiarity with the texts. So it involves, although we've got this translation here, this is really kind of quite revolutionary in a way.
It'll require a revolution in terms of the culture of reading as well.
Yeah.
One of the constant warnings I get from older people is that you're writing all these good books, but who's going to read them?
Yeah.
We don't have readers anymore, and that has to change as well.
Yeah.
Like people have to get back into books, whatever form. It doesn't have to be a paper book. It can be an e-book as well, an audio book, whatever it is. But reading and kind of benefiting from books. People want access. I think they want direct access more. I think that's probably more of a modern trend than kind of saying, let's leave it up to the scholars.
Mm-hmm.
At least I think younger people, they'd rather take it in their own hands and say, show me and let me see it.
Yeah.
But the problem until now is that we don't have anything to show them.
Yes.
Right? You show them a bad translation and it's going to leave them with more questions and doubts than they had to begin with.
That's true, yeah, because I've bought some books in the past where, a biography of Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salam, I pick it up, I can't read this. So okay, put it on the shelf, and so it gets left. I think there is, perhaps as you say, there's been a lack of accessibility, like people have not been able to get hold of the texts. But I mean, I have found that perhaps it hasn't occurred to people to get hold of the texts. Wherever I've found that you'd say, well, so have you got this at home? No.
Right.
And I know that people do like to listen to lectures, but as you say, what is the importance of reading? I mean, what is the importance of publishing this book? Why should we read? Why should we have this book, become familiar with these narrations? How can that change the situation of the followers of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam for the future?
Right. There are a lot of things to say. I mean, one is listening to lectures in even education theory and any field is a very poor way of learning.
Right.
Right. So you want to engage as much of yourself as you can in the learning process to be able to take away more. And so that's something that we've been using the weakest of ways of learning as the predominant way of educating ourselves, and that's a travesty. How can people benefit from a hadith? One thing is, I think they should keep in mind that humility that they need to maintain.
Yeah.
We all need to maintain as we approach the texts.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you can, it's very easy. If you're arrogant and you learn something, then it's very easy to misuse that and kind of it leads to very bad things. But if you approach even the hardest things with humility and you learn it, you still you remain grounded. Mm-hmm. There was a quote. One of my teachers had studied with Allama Tabatabai, and he said that he used to say, no matter how much you learn, always remember what you don't know, and you'll stay humble.
Yeah.
Because what you don't know is always infinite. So that's important as a kind of a precursor to studying the book. You can benefit from the book at least in a couple of ways. I think people can get a sense for the seerah of the Imams and the Prophet a lot better through reading the ahadith, because you're getting a little window into a particular interaction that he had with a particular person.
Yes.
Sometimes it's a companion, sometimes it's an enemy, with a servant, with a member of the family. But you see a person asking a question or a person doing something, you see the Imam's reaction, and that whole, the cumulative effect of that, all of a sudden they become more than just two-dimensional people in a book. And you start to see all the colors of who they really were. Yeah, that's really valuable. Another way that I think people can use it is to enhance their understanding of the legal rulings, the fatwa of our maraja. Right, not to second guess them or to prove them wrong. Right, that's not the purpose, but to kind of follow their lead. Like they've given you the fatwa that, for instance, a simple fatwa that prayer is wajib. Right? They tell you it's wajib, that's fine, that's the ruling. But now if you read a hadith about the prayer, then that adds color to your understanding. It adds motivation. The way the Imams encourage people to pray, the way they describe someone who doesn't pray, the rewards they offer, the similes and metaphors that they use to describe the prayer. And all of that enhances our understanding and also increases our motivation to do what the fatwa is telling us to do.
Yeah, I think that's, as you say, I mean, I remember also reading something that a scholar said, or an academic even said, about the flavour of the narrations in the Shi'i texts, that they are more subtle, they are more, because they're spiritual, for want of a better way of putting it. I'm not too keen on that word, but they are definitely deeper in terms of the inner meaning of everything. Mm-hmm. I was thinking of, again, the symbolism of the Kaaba. I mean, often we say, okay, yes, we pray. Of course, Kaaba was, built by Adam, renovated by Prophet Ibrahim, and so on. And you say, okay, when I do my salah, I face, Kaaba. But you can find out in Al-Kafi the sort of the inner spiritual kind of dimensions of Kaaba, what it signifies and symbolizes. And then you realize more why you're facing the Kaaba, why you should face Kaaba. Right. So that's sort of one example.
Absolutely.
We've just got a couple of minutes till we have to end, but are you continuing with this translation? I mean, have you got the aim for...
Yeah, inshallah. Yeah, we work every day, and that's one of the, especially one of our scholars on the team. He's he's always been a workaholic in the best sense of the word. Right? I remember as soon as, even when I studied with him, no less than 30 seconds after he entered the class would start, and he wouldn't waste a moment. Every waking moment, he's actively doing something. Yeah, we're continuing. It's kind of an inner joke, inside joke amongst ourselves. We'll say, like, inshallah, like, 200 years down the road, when you get to book number 20, then we'll talk about this subject. So, and we don't have.
May Allah bless you all with long lives.
Yeah, inshallah, we'll live the length of the
every time one comes up, then we'll have to have an interview here.
Inshallah.
And inshallah, if we're all alive, kind of down the line, we can. That would be something quite interesting, and then we could have a kind of a selection of clips over the next 20, 30, 40 years of interviews every time a volume comes out, and then we can see how things have changed, inshallah. So at the moment you're planning on the next volume, you're working on that at the moment?
Yeah, the next volume is the Book of Knowledge and its merit, and that's in the relative final stages of editing.
Right.
So by the time layout and all that stuff happens, it might take 5 or 6 months to come out.
Okay.
Kitab al-Tawheed, the third book, is we're still working on the Arabic. It's a longer book. So we're probably about a fourth of the way through on the Arabic commentary. So it's still a while on that one.
Right.
We are working on a commentary on Ziyarat Ashura, which should be done much sooner. I'm working on the English right now.
Excellent.
So there, inshallah, maybe every 6 months, every year, you'll see a product from us, inshallah.
Inshallah. So this is, again, Islamic Text Institute. You have, this has been your main project, or as you say, you're working commentary for Ziyarat Ashura, you have other projects as well?
So Islamic Text Institute has done all of these things. Our first publication was An-Nudba.
Right.
The whole focus is to work on primary texts.
Yeah.
So hadith, du'as, and inshallah Quran eventually, if we can kind of build a team for it. So Nudba was one of the projects, and Ziyarat Ashura. Dua Kumail is also in the works. But Al-Kafi from day one has been kind of the continuous project.
Yeah.
The other things we kind of fit in here and there. When someone gets ahead of the rest of the group, they'll work on a side project.
Right. Inshallah, I mean, we pray for your continued success, and for anyone who wants to get hold of these texts as well, they can just go to your.
The best thing is to go through Taqwa Media, because they have the system set up now to
Okay.
So taqwamedia.com, I think, is the website.
Yeah. And, so I think this is, inshallah, definitely, as you say, the way forward for English-speaking or sort of bilingual, trilingual Muslims growing up in different parts of the world to be able to access a text that speaks to them. And the good thing about using the word access, the good thing about this is that it's a lot more accessible than the Wafis translation. I mean, with the Wafis translation, and I don't know if anyone's watching out there in Tehran, but they've got their website with a few of the PDF documents with the first few books.
Okay.
But I remember, well, where's the rest of it? And I remember writing to them, saying, where's the rest of it? And they said, we are gradually putting it up, gradually. So
they actually contacted me. I remember before I left Iran, they contacted me and said, we have all of this stuff here. Why don't you just do this instead of starting over again? Oh,
so they've actually got it all, but they just haven't put it up online.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is another thing that, inshallah, hopefully it will be. Obviously, it'll take time, but it'll be a bit faster than gradually. Inshallah. That's great. Thank you very much. And again, just a reminder to our viewers, you may have seen some of the promotional short videos that have been talking about Al-Kafi, and you may even have heard it be mentioned by different scholars. It's obviously one of the earliest collections of narrations directly from the Imams of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, and if I would say personally that if we are going to become a better educated community, ummah, followers of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, it's really vital that we become familiar with this book. We know what it was, we know about the compiler, the original compiler, and we become familiar with what these treasures that the Imams of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam had to pass on, as well as we get in these books their debates with other scholars of the time. So we've got Imam Jafar as-Sadiq with Imam Abu Hanifa, for example, sorting out some of the kind of more technical issues in the deen, which is very crucial for a sound aqeedah, we could say, a sound.
Absolutely.
So inshallah, we'll hope to see you again in another program. Thank you very much, Sheikh Rizwan, for being our guest, and thank you for watching, and inshallah we'll see you in the next program. Assalamu alaikum.